Benjamin Franklin once observed that most of us do not need to be instructed, we just need to be reminded. In other words, we know the stuff. We know what's important in order to succeed in whatever we're doing professionally or even personally, but we often forget the basics. And in that same vein, I want to share one of Benjamin Franklin's other more famous quotes. And the quote that has specific relevance to educators is, tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. Now, of course, that is not a new quote. It's been around as a principle for many, many years, and yet can I suggest the importance of involving students in the learning process, making a learning experience that is impactful and memorable is more important now than ever before. Now, if you look at the data, for instance, from the Dun & Price Learning Styles Inventory, when that inventory was first released in the late 1970s, over 70% of students registered as auditory learners. In other words, they learn best in that didactic style. Now, that's not to say that 70% of students were born auditory learners. They'd learned to learn that way because of the era they were being educated in. Now today, if you look at how many on that same scale are auditory learners, it is less than 30%. We've seen the whole nature of how students learn shift enormously. Far more of them are kinesthetic learners. They need to be involved in the learning process if that learning is going to stick. So the question then is, how can we build a learning experience that really gets cut through with students today, that makes learning memorable and meaningful? 3 quick keys to doing just that. The first is this: we need to make learning real. We need to make sure that learning connects beyond the classroom walls in some really tangible ways. And there's some great technology today that allows us to do this brilliantly in classrooms. For instance, technology like Skype in the classroom that allows for video conferencing, virtual lessons, excursions to other parts of the world, all from within the confines of the classroom, leveraging some of the best technology that the world is producing right now. Or look at another video conferencing platform like Empatico, for instance. Empatico is brilliant because it allows you to connect with students in other classrooms around the world to break down barriers. But it's not just about video conferencing. Virtual reality is another great technology that allows you to bring learning to life in a very visceral, tangible way. But even take the technology aside, just role-playing, scenario planning in a school setting or a classroom setting is so important. Look at some of the work from Dorothy Heathcote over the years, and you look at how powerful role-playing can be in bringing learning to life. So the first key is we've got to make learning real. Second key is we've got to make learning tangible. We've got to create something that is a genuinely visceral experience. And remember early on in my career when I was working with educators looking at how to make learning memorable for the digital natives of students. I remember speaking with a teacher, a mathematics teacher, who had a class where they were trying to learn ratios, and they were sort of middle school class, and they'd been trying every exercise in the textbook for weeks to try and get through how to understand ratios to this group of students. They just weren't getting it. And this teacher, I'll never forget, he said, I got so frustrated one day. We were actually parked across the road. Our school was across the road from a big race course. I got the students to pack their books up, and we headed across the street and sat outside the high rollers room, and we watched for one lesson as countless sums were won and lost just because of ratios. And he said, those students, you just watch the light bulbs go on, because all of a sudden what we were learning in class had specific relevance to something that was tangible beyond the classroom confines. Another great example I read about from a class in North Dakota in the town of Fargo. And they were doing a unit on the history of the buildings, for instance, in the main street. And rather than just learning about the buildings, the students went out into the town, interviewed people who'd worked in the buildings, who had stories about the buildings, did their own primary research, and then produced videos about the history of each building. The videos were so good, the local tourist board decided to create QR codes for each of these videos and put the QR code in the outside of the building. So tourists, when they visit Fargo, can hold their phones over those QR codes and watch the videos these students produced, showing the history of that particular building. And it's amazing, you get a sense of just reading about that example, how much it brought the whole lesson to life, because it was real, it was tangible, it wasn't learning in a vacuum in a classroom environment. Third key is we've got to make learning practical. And there's been lots of discussions in recent years about how to make learning a very practical experience using project-based learning or problem-based learning. And the reality is, if you look at the data worldwide, only about 1% of schools are actually using PBL as a foundational element of everything they're doing in the classroom. Now, why is this? Why are so few schools really grasping the value and the benefits of PBL? One of the reasons is it can often seem too complicated, too impractical. And so I'll look at just some of the key elements of project-based learning, or PBL, just to try and demystify a lot of what we hear about this and show just how easy it can be to implement. So a couple of the key elements of PBL. Number one, the first element of project-based learning is that the problems that are solved or the projects that are embarked on are real-world ones that foster inquiry. Number two, students need to have some degree of choice over the learning and discovery process. It can't just be dictated by a teacher. Number three, small group collaboration is key. This is never a working on your own scenario. Part of the benefit of PBL is the fact that it teaches so many of those collaborative skills. Number four, projects tend to be a duration between 1 and 3 weeks. And number five, students are the ones who take primary responsibility for monitoring their progress and communicating the results along the way. It really has never been more important that we make learning an experience that is memorable and meaningful for students. And here's just 3 ways to do it. We've got to make learning real, we've got to make it tangible, and we've got to make it practical. Now, this is not necessarily easy. We've got to be mindful that this requires a shift in our philosophy, our paradigm of education in some cases, but it's a shift well worth making.